Welcome to episode 20 of Out of Bounds, a podcast where I give my social commentary on different topics in today's society. I'm your host, Terry, and today we're talking about Cardi B and this idea of the double standard between men and women. So real quick, if you didn't hear, or if you want to go take the time to look, Cardi B, I wouldn't say a controversy. I would say she raised some eyebrows and got some people heated with a video that resurfaced that was from years ago, where she talked about that some of the things that she had to do to survive back then. If you didn't know, she came up as a stripper. And so one of the things she was talking about was that she used to take men that wanted to have sex with her, drug them, and then rob them at hotels and whatever. And so, of course, people were, raised the eyebrow like, wait, what? You used to do what now? And so, that kind of became a big thing. And then that kind of snowballed into this whole putting Cardi B with Bill Cosby and everybody else, that were perpetrators in the Me Too movement, and talking about, what she was doing was illegal and violating people and all these different things. And then some people start, mostly men, start talking about the double standard that, these people had their career ended and in jail, and she's not because she's a woman, and some women, on that bandwagon too as well. So a lot of stuff going on. I would start with this because it's a number of things to talk about. Is there a double standard? Yes. And double standards, usually come with some type of context or historical context or whatnot. Cause we could talk about, discrimination, affirmative action, all these different things. And you have to, in that conversation, talk about the historical context behind why, society has deemed that type of stuff appropriate. And that might be a little different, but it's still this idea that historical context comes with it. As much as we like to talk about equality, we aren't equal because we haven't gone through equal things as a society. And so when you're talking about this double standard, I would say it's a double standard in the sense that, if a male, whoever, entertainer, athlete, whoever, came out and said the same thing, that it would be a lot more of a backlash. I think there's a little bit of backlash on Cardi B, but it's definitely nothing on the scales that we usually see with the vocal minority on Twitter and people calling for jobs and all this different thing. So I'm not even talking about the situation. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm talking about the exact same situation, just have a man in there. It would have been a lot more of fervor because, inevitably people would have tried to link that to sexual assault, harassment, and rape. And the thing is that we're talking about, and we'll get to in a minute, is that Cardi B wasn't talking about any sexual contact. She was just talking about robbery. And so if a man had came out and said the same thing, that they was doing it to men or women, I do 100% believe there would have been some type of link to Me Too and sexual harassment and calls to Bill Cosby and all that on a much higher level than it is for Cardi B because, she is a woman. And so there's that. I just think it would have been taken a lot more out of context. And even though this has been taken out of context a little bit, it would have been worse if it was a man, in my opinion, because that's the society we live in right now, where that's who people are witch hunting. And so, there we go. Now, even with that being said about that double standard, here's the fact. As I mentioned, Cardi B is not the same as what, Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein or any of those other people did. Some people keep saying it's the same. It is really not the same. I mean, I get that you're upset and that you feel that Cardi B needs to have, some accountability for what she talked about doing. It's alleged, no proof that she did it. but at the same time, just lumping it in is a problem. And that is something I've talked about before, because anytime any celebrity did something like after the Me Too thing, it just got lumped into Me Too. Like, you had the guy over at Pixar who never assaulted or harassed anybody. It was more so people felt uncomfortable with how familiar he was. You know, he hugged a little too much. He might put his hand on you a little too much. It was no incidence of like, you know, do this or you're going to lose your job. It was no incidence of flashing and exposing himself. It was none of that. It wasn't right. I mean, people felt uncomfortable whether he knew or not. He just was too friendly. And so people, you know, felt a way about it, and he ended up having to go. And then the same thing with Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman was accused of just basically being too much of a flirt and too direct. I mean, I don't know if it's harassment to say, you know, hey, would you like to go? You know, I think you look like this, or, you know, and we're not talking about catcalling. We're talking about somebody just being direct. I think you look good. Hey, you want to do this? They say no. They say no. We're not talking about, oh, you said no, I'm Morgan Freeman, you have to do it, or I'll pay you to do it, or if you don't do it, you're going to get fired. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about unwanted behavior. But you have people like those two being lumped into Me Too, and then people who don't read, which is most people, then they're just like, oh man, Morgan Freeman was raping people too. No, he was not. It's just everyone just started lumping everything into Me Too. So if you start doing that with, or if I would say you shouldn't do that with them, I wouldn't do it with Cardi B either. Cardi B wasn't talking about sexually violating someone. Is it a violation to drug someone against their will and to take their money and rob them? Of course it is. Is it the same level as sexually violating or raping somebody? I would not go as far to say that. Both are illegal. Both should be held accountable, but she's not Bill Cosby. Like, let's just stop there. I mean, yes, there's talking about drugs and whatnot, but when you're talking about violating someone's body unconsciously versus just taking their material possessions, is not the exact same thing. It is not even close to the same thing. And so again, like I've talked about before with moral grandstanding, if somebody says, hey, that's not the same thing, then inevitably somebody like, oh, so you're condoning Cardi B. Oh, you're saying what she's doing is okay, or what she did is okay. No. Stop twisting words. Stop the black and white line. I can recognize that those are both not the same, and I can still recognize that they're both bad, and I can recognize that one is worse than the other and still think the other one is bad. So, I would say the conversation, first and foremost, people got to stop with this Cardi B, Bill Cosby thing, because that's not the same thing, raping somebody and stealing from them. And then secondly, if somebody points that out, don't try to accuse them of condoning or being on her side. Of course, there's people on her side, but yeah. So, and then of course you got the group that just simply says, well, she was being taken advantage of all the time. So, you know, eye for an eye and all that type of stuff. And that's not something I would condone or say that's right. I don't want to hear that. She was a stripper. We know that lifestyle. We know that lifestyle can spin into other things on the side. Hey, she did what she had to do or what she felt she had to do. Okay, no one forced her to do those things. And so if that's something that she truly did, yes, she should be held accountable for it. There is no, oh, you know, I was just trying to survive. I mean, that stuff doesn't hold up in court. And so anybody else that killed somebody or robbed somebody or, you know, robbed a bank or whatever, because they felt they needed to do it, that doesn't excuse them in the court of law. So not going to give her a pass on that. But as far as the whole idea of this being a double standard, in some ways, as I mentioned before, in some ways, but overall, I would not sit here and say that Cardi B is on the level of somebody like a Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, and people are just looking the other way because she's a woman. That I'd absolutely not say. But I would say that people have to understand that there's a lot of people that are hurt and they're looking for their own pound of flesh. And so when we're talking about the Me Too movement and what turned into a witch hunt, not to say that these people didn't do it or they shouldn't have been prosecuted, but it did turn into this witch hunt. And I talked about before with moral grandstanding, where everybody wanted to point everybody out so they could look better. And so with that, it became this narrative that still exists now that men are bad. And people try to, oh, well, we're not talking about you when we say all men are terrible, all men are this or that, or I hate men. I don't want to hear that. Yeah, all means all. And so there's a lot of people offended, felt attacked, felt whatever. I mean, it's the same exact conversation people have about Caucasian people, and we talk about affirmative action and whatnot, and they feel like it's reverse racism because now they're being pointed out. A lot of men felt that way, that men are being pointed out for whatever privilege they might have had or might not have had just being a man. Simply people were pointing you out. People felt hurt, upset, and attacked by that, and they are clearly still looking for somebody that they could point to too. And I could identify with that feeling on some level, but doesn't make it right. I just think that Cardi B is being used as an example of, hey, all men are evil. Stop talking as if, man, just men are the problem. And I've said many a times that, I check articles from Yahoo every day just cause it's my homepage or whatever. I know I use Yahoo, whatever, but I see articles all the time about different things. And I remember in the heat of the Me Too movement stuff, that whenever there was a few and far between article about a politician or an actress or somebody that did something, harassment or assault towards someone, and it was like, I always say, it was like no one was saying anything. There was no upheaval. There was no people on YouTube covering it. There was no tweets about it. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah, buried down there. This one senator, she did this to her assistant, and okay. And I was just like, how crazy is that double standard? Because that anybody else did anything. And it wasn't just big celebrities. Anybody did anything at that time. It was hashtag Me Too, Time's Up, men are disgusting, like all this different stuff. But then nobody would say anything if the story was about a woman harassing somebody. And so I definitely felt that double standard. I've definitely seen that. And I felt that, like, man, everybody's trying to scapegoat men and that they're just overlooking these stories of women. So I can understand some people are definitely coming from there with this Cardi B thing. And that's your right to, but I would say don't try to mix it up and play it up just so you can prove your point. She didn't rape people. That's a very different violation. And so I would say that always more than one thing could be true at a time. And what Cardi B did, if she did it and there's proof, she should be held accountable. But let's stop with the witch hunt. She's not a Bill Cosby level type person or any of that. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Go to the comment section. Let me know what you think. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around, get the convo started. And until next time.